Maplewood had always been the kind of town that people described as perfect. It was quiet, peaceful, and far removed from the chaos of the outside world. The streets were lined with tall oak trees that turned golden every fall, and neighbors still waved to each other from their porches. Children rode their bikes freely, and the local bakery knew everyone by name. Nothing bad ever seemed to happen there until the morning of October 9th, 1992. That was the day everything changed. The day when Maplewood lost its innocence forever. The morning began like any other. The sun crept over the hills, and a faint mist hovered above the town's narrow streets. At 7:45 a.m., a mail carrier named Nancy Turner noticed something unusual while walking her route along Birchwood Lane. The Dawson family's front door was wide open, and Claire Dawson's car was still parked in the driveway. Nancy hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer to call out, but no one answered. Through the doorway, she could see a broken coffee mug on the floor and the faint glimmer of spilled liquid across the tiles. She called the police immediately, sensing something was terribly wrong. When officers arrived, the scene inside the house felt eerily still. Nothing appeared stolen or ransacked. The television was off, breakfast dishes were still on the counter, and the family dog sat quietly near the hallway, as if waiting for someone to return. Then one of the officers noticed a faint trail of blood leading from the kitchen door toward the backyard. It was a small smear at first, then more visible as it continued through the grass and into the woods that bordered the property. About 50 yards into the trees, they found her. Claire Dawson, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher known for her kindness and patience, lay motionless beneath a layer of fallen leaves. Her injuries were brutal, the kind that spoke of rage rather than intent to rob. The discovery shook even the most seasoned officers. The idea that such violence could erupt in a place like Maplewood seemed unthinkable. News spread quickly. By noon, the town was swarming with police cars, reporters, and shocked neighbors. For the first time in its history, Maplewood felt fear. The townspeople gathered in small clusters, whispering theories and praying for answers. Somewhere among them, the person responsible was hiding, quiet and unnoticed. The peace that once defined Maplewood had vanished in a single morning. Leaving behind only silence and suspicion, detectives began their investigation with determination. Determined to uncover who could have committed such a horrifying act in a town so unaccustomed to crime, they started by retracing Claire Dawson's final hours. Neighbors reported seeing her gardening the evening before, smiling and waving as always. She had plans to attend a school meeting later that week and had spoken excitedly about decorating her classroom for Halloween. Nothing about her life suggested trouble or fear, yet the way she died told investigators that someone harbored deep anger toward her. As police combed through her home, they found no signs of forced entry. Whoever entered that morning either knew Claire or had been invited in. Her purse and valuables remained untouched, which ruled out robbery. That left a more personal motive: revenge or obsession. The search for suspects began, and soon one name stood out among the rest: Daniel Price. Daniel was a 38-year-old handyman who had been hired by the Dawsons for various repairs around their home. People in town described him as quiet, almost withdrawn, and someone who preferred the solitude of his cabin deep in the woods. Though polite, he rarely made eye contact and avoided conversations longer than necessary. Claire's husband had fired him a few weeks before the murder, after an argument over a payment dispute. Some townspeople remembered hearing Daniel's raised voice that day, something very out of character for him. When news of the murder spread, suspicion fell on him almost immediately. Investigators questioned Daniel at his cabin. He appeared nervous but cooperative, insisting he had been working at another property the day of the murder. His alibi, however, could not be confirmed. When officers searched his surroundings, they discovered something alarming: a blood-stained glove lying near a pile of chopped wood behind his cabin. Laboratory results later confirmed that the blood matched Claire Dawson's. The evidence sent shockwaves through the department. With that discovery, Daniel became the prime suspect. He was arrested and charged with Claire's murder despite his consistent claims of innocence. The town breathed a sigh of relief, believing justice had been served. But in the corners of the police station, doubts lingered. The crime scene held no fingerprints, no weapon, and no clear motive. Something about the case didn't quite fit together. Yet for Maplewood, desperate to move on from its nightmare, Daniel Price seemed like the perfect suspect. Too perfect. Daniel Price's arrest brought temporary calm to Maplewood, but that peace did not last long. The evidence against him, though convincing on the surface, had cracks that no one could ignore. His lawyer insisted the glove had been planted, pointing out how the blood on it was oddly fresh compared to the date of Claire's murder. Detectives began to recheck every report and timeline, but before any new conclusions could be drawn, something happened that turned the entire case upside down. Daniel disappeared. It was a cold morning in December when a ranger found Daniel's truck abandoned on a dirt road near the old logging trail. The keys were still in the ignition, the driver's door half open, and inside were his wallet ID, and a handwritten note that read, "I didn't do it." There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints in the snow leading away from the vehicle. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. News of his disappearance spread rapidly, reviving panic across the town. Some believed he had fled to avoid trial. Others whispered darker theories that the real killer had silenced him. Despite an extensive search using helicopters, dogs, and volunteers, no trace of Daniel was found. The woods near Maplewood were vast, thick, and unforgiving, making it easy for someone to disappear forever. After weeks of searching, authorities called off the operation, officially labeling him a fugitive. The town of Maplewood felt betrayed. They had believed they had their killer, and now he was gone, leaving nothing but questions and fear behind. As the years passed, the Dawson murder slowly faded into a local legend, a chilling story told to newcomers and whispered about at town gatherings. People avoided the woods near Daniel's cabin, calling them cursed. His property remained untouched, slowly decaying, its windows dark and hollow. Nearly a decade later, hikers exploring a remote area stumbled upon something strange: a pile of old, weathered clothes half buried in mud near the same logging road where Daniel's truck had been found. The garments were stained with dried blood, but they didn't belong to Daniel. When the fabric was tested, the results shocked investigators. The clothes belonged to a missing drifter named Thomas Reed, who had vanished from a nearby county just days after Claire's murder. That discovery reopened everything. The story Maplewood thought it knew was about to be rewritten. The discovery of Thomas Reed's clothes reignited the investigation that had been cold for nearly 10 years. Detectives who had long since moved on from the Dawson case were suddenly called back. The connection between Claire Dawson's murder and the missing drifter was too strong to ignore. Thomas Reed had been a transient man, moving from town to town, picking up small jobs, and leaving suddenly whenever trouble followed. His name had appeared briefly in the early days of the investigation, but at the time, no one could tie him directly to Maplewood. Now, that had changed. Records showed that Thomas had lived in a nearby town years earlier, in the same neighborhood where Claire grew up before she moved to Maplewood. He had once been arrested for stalking a young woman, but the charges were dropped when he fled the state. Investigators began to suspect that Thomas had developed an obsession with Claire long before she ever settled in her quiet new town. He had followed her from place to place, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Forensic experts examined the old evidence with new technology unavailable in the 1990s. The results were startling. The fingerprints on the broken glass from Claire's kitchen, evidence that had never matched Daniel, were now identified as belonging to Thomas Reed. It was the breakthrough everyone had missed. Daniel Price, the man accused of murder and labeled a monster, was innocent. The glove found at his cabin was likely planted, part of a desperate effort by Reed to divert suspicion after killing Claire. Investigators pieced together what might have happened. On the night of the murder, Reed entered the Dawson home, possibly through an unlocked door. Claire recognized him from her past, which sent him into a violent panic. After the attack, he fled into the woods, bleeding from an injury she had inflicted himself. In his frantic escape, he stumbled upon Daniel's cabin and used it as a temporary hideout, leaving behind incriminating evidence to shift the blame. But Reed never made it far. Something happened that night in those woods, something fatal. Whether it was exposure, injury, or confrontation, Reed disappeared completely. Yet, one haunting question remained. If Reed died near Daniel's cabin, then what had happened to Daniel himself? The answer would come years later, hidden beneath the earth. In the spring of 2010, a powerful storm swept through Maplewood, tearing down trees and flooding the narrow roads that led to the old Price property. For years, Daniel's cabin had stood abandoned, its roof caved in, and its walls cloaked in moss and vines. After the storm passed, a local farmer noticed that part of the ground behind the cabin had collapsed, revealing a hidden structure underneath. When police arrived to investigate, they uncovered what appeared to be an old root cellar sealed decades ago. What they found inside would finally reveal the truth that had haunted Maplewood for nearly 20 years. Beneath layers of dirt and rotted wood lay two skeletons, both partially preserved by the cold, damp earth. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. Forensic experts carefully examined the remains, and within weeks, the identities were confirmed. One was Daniel Price. The other was Thomas Reed. After years of speculation and rumor, the mystery had come full circle. But the positioning of the bodies told a story far more tragic than anyone expected. It appeared that Daniel had returned to his cabin the night Reed fled into the woods. Evidence suggested a violent struggle had taken place inside the cabin. Broken furniture, bloodstains, and marks on the walls hinted at chaos. Investigators concluded that Daniel likely found Reed hiding there and realized he was the true killer. In the confrontation that followed, both men fought for their lives. Reed may have attacked first, but Daniel fought back, mortally wounding his attacker before succumbing to his own injuries. Both men died where they fell, and over time, nature buried the truth beneath the soil. When the findings were made public, Maplewood reacted with disbelief and guilt. The man they had once feared and condemned was innocent all along. For years, Daniel had been branded a murderer, his name whispered with disgust and suspicion. Now he was remembered as a man who tried to do the right thing, and paid the ultimate price for it. The town held a small ceremony in his honor, laying flowers on his grave beside the woman he had been accused of killing. Maplewood would never forget the lesson the Dawson case left behind, that evil can hide behind ordinary faces. And sometimes, the greatest injustices happen not in the crime itself, but in the silence that follows it,